Guest today is Tina Crook. She's the math curriculum coordinator for grades 6 through 12 in Barnstable Public Schools. Julian, thank you so much for joining us today. We have a couple things that we want to talk about. First thing I want to bring up is the retail task force. There was a kind of like a tour, I think it was last week. What can you tell me about this?
Glad to be with you, Sarah.
Thank you.
So this is a special task force that the Senate President appointed earlier this year for the Senate and various stakeholders to take a really deep dive to some of the issues and challenges that are facing all of our retailers across the Commonwealth. So yes, that's bigger retailers, but more importantly and more germane to the Cape, our sort of small mom and pop Main Street stores. There's a whole host of things that have been changing in the retail environment. I think the most obvious one, right, is the emergence of online shopping, but certainly a whole host of other concerns. And so I was asked to be appointed to this panel, given my real background as someone who grew up in a small business, in a retail establishment, a restaurant. And so what we did, we've been having several hearings in Boston, and then we've been doing a tour across the state. And so I hosted a visit last week with several senators, in addition to stakeholders from the retail and workforce industries. So first we were in Harwichport and had a working lunch at Land Ho there, did a tour of Harwichport, and then came to Main Street Hyannis as well, and had a listening session, did a tour as well. So we really received some valuable feedback from folks in the retail industry on the concerns that they're experiencing.
What would you say? What were the main concerns that the local retailers were said that they had?
So overall, I think attracting workforce, retaining workforce, and housing are two big themes that we hear time and again. I think also heard from folks about sort of sometimes the unintended consequences of programs that are meant to really help workers and employees, and the implementation costs of those. Some feedback as well around sales tax, around how do you level the playing field. And then I think specific to the Cape, really the seasonality that we have. And so there's a lot of conversation, led by folks like Wendy Northcross of the Cape Cod Chamber about, how do you extend that season? How do we promote tourism? A lot of the retail that we have is actually through folks who come and visit our communities either for a few days or a week or stay the summer. That's really important from retailers. Heard from folks, like Amanda Converse from Live Local and a local store owner as well on Main Street Hyannis, about how do you really support young folks who want to start off and open their own businesses. Really want to thank Felice at Alberto's for hosting us in Hyannis, as well as Elizabeth Worth Main and others who've been really working to, I think, improve things on Main Street. So that's some of the feedback that we've received. We're now going to be heading to out west to Northampton and to Western Massachusetts next Monday for another series in the listening session, and we're hoping to have a report by the end of June.
Wonderful. I think it's such a great, I'm so glad to hear that you're a part of this committee, because it is a huge problem here on Cape Cod. Is, the local retail establishments, the seasonal workers, it's, they need more workers in the summertime, but that's the time of year that it's really hard to find housing, because all of these winter rentals turn into summer rentals, and they're only rented on a week-by-week basis. So you need more workers, but where can we put them? So,
yeah, small business is the bread and butter of our economy on the Cape.
It's when a lot of people make their money to make their business work throughout the entire year.
And I think it's gotten harder and harder to own and maintain a business in the region. Another topic we talked about was this concept of employee ownership. So, when someone's looking to, you've had a business for a few years or a few decades, you're looking to sell or get out. My family was in this position with our restaurant. There's actually some really favorable provisions, some tax provisions for employers who sell to their employees. And I think that this is a policy and a program. It's been around for a while. It was actually implemented under tax reform during the Reagan administration, so quite some time ago. But a lot of folks haven't been taking advantage of it. So we spent some time talking to businesses and especially to retailers about about this program. Or rather, it's not a program; it's a series of incentives. Because I think if you look at if you just look at the books of our retailers in the region, they can help people support a good living, but often increasingly the most valuable part of the business happens to be the real estate. And we want to make sure these businesses are continued, right? We want local shops, we want local restaurants, we want to be able to continue that. So another thing we talked about was this employee ownership program that might really help continue some of the kind of keystone businesses that we have in our communities and our downtowns.
Wonderful. I could look forward to chatting with you again in a couple months once the task force has kind of put together their presentation on what they found.
Absolutely.
The next thing we want to talk about is the Women's March that happened in Hyannis, and you were able to attend this. How did the event go? I wish I was able to attend myself, but I wasn't.
It was pretty inspiring. I mean, I've never seen that many people gather on Cape Cod. I think the crowd estimates were somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 people. Wow. A lot of women, but also a few good men. I was really honored. I was one of the very few men who spoke, and I spoke really briefly, and was really honored to do so. This was an event planned by women, about women. And what I essentially did is I said, look, we need women in our public life now more than ever, and asked women in the crowd to give their time to run for office, to serve in local positions. And actually the following weekend, this past weekend, we actually had a candidate training and had 30 people who showed up for that, many of whom had attended the Women's March. These are people who I had never met before. And so I think really inspiring to see how engaged our community is. And I think that folks of all stripes really turning out. And I think on one end, yes, really rejecting, I think, this very toxic, hateful rhetoric that we have at the national level, but also really coming together in a very collaborative way to say, all right, how do we make our little piece of the world here on Cape Cod a little better? And that's pretty inspiring.
That's wonderful. Anytime somebody wants to get involved in their community, I think is a positive thing.
Absolutely. And one thing that we do, if you go to senatorcyr.com, we keep just a listing of all the vacancies, or most all the vacancies that we have across all the 20 towns that I represent. So, if you are someone who is maybe anxiously watching watching cable news, and you need an outlet, there's plenty of places. We need good people. And this is not partisan stuff, right? Serving on the planning boards, the boards of health,
right?
Helping to support people. I actually headed over to Nantucket. Nantucket also had a Women's March too that I was able to attend that same day, and about 200 folks showed up for that. So it was one of those. It was a pretty inspiring day.
Wonderful. Well, Julian, thank you so much for taking time to chat with us today. I really appreciate it, and look forward to chatting with you again in a couple weeks.
Always a pleasure. Look forward to being back.
Oh,
Thanks,
great.
Sarah. Take care.
You too. Bye. My guest today was Cape and Island State Senator